Hey everyone, my name is Pastor Dan. I'm the lead pastor at the Lighthouse Church in Brea, California. Thanks for checking in on us right now. And I want to invite you to sit back and listen to some great stuff that we're going to share with you about our missionaries. Our church has always had a heart for sending the light beyond our reach into other countries all around the world. We've always been a missions church. We usually, this month, in the month of March, we have this missions conference, which we weren't able to do this year because of the coronavirus stuff and all the meetings being shut down. During that week, we would typically have these home meetings, which are great opportunities to sit in the same room with missionaries, hear their stories, their testimony, and the exciting things that God is doing in other countries with them. And that inspires our people to give and pray for these missionaries. And we have great relationships with a lot of great missionaries because of this. Because we couldn't meet though, we decided to shoot some videos where I have some Q&A times with these missionaries so you can hear their stories, and if you already know them, be reminded and get caught up with what they are doing. So we're going to start with Dave and Hope Reinhardt. We have been with these guys for a long time, probably since the beginning, supporting them and praying for them and having a relationship with them. They're in the city of Iquique, Chile, way down south, and they have a great testimony and great things to share, and here they are. So sit back and listen and enjoy.
Hi, my name is Dave Reinhardt and my wife Hope, and we've been missionaries in the land of Chile for 39 years. We've been part of your church for most of that time as well. We've been a long time, as my parents used to come here, Jack and Edie. In fact, I was always known as Jack and Edie's boy. And then later on, we were on the field and our son Dustin came and was on staff here at the church, and so we were always known as Dustin's mom and dad. And so then Dustin had a child and we became Emma's grandparents. But basically we're David and Hope Reinhardt, and we've been in the land of Chile, and we are church planters. And this is my wife, I'll let her say a word.
I'm Hope. It's so good to see you. We miss you. Hope you'd come and visit us sometime.
When I was in Bible college, and my wife was there with us, and we surrendered to be pastors and later to the mission field. As we were considering what country we were going to go to, the first country that came to our mind was South Korea, because everybody that was teaching us in our Bible college were ex-missionaries to South Korea. But a pastor was talking to me, and because I grew up here in Whittier, knew some Spanish. He said, "Why would God send you to Korea if you know Spanish?" So I began deciding, okay, I'm not going to go to Korea, and I had limited it to two different countries. One was Mexico, because of it being so close, and the other was Ecuador, because I'd done a project in school on it. Well, I remember I was in a class one time, and I was talking to another missionary, and the question came up, how does God direct somebody to a certain country? And at that moment he said, many times God will use that you've been to that country in the past, like men that have been in the army in Germany went back as missionaries to Germany and such. And at that moment I'm thinking, oh, well, I've never been anywhere. But I thought about it and I said, but my dad has. You see, my dad grew up in Chile. My grandfather worked for the Anaconda copper mines in Montana and was sent down to Chile in 1928. And so my dad was a 4-year-old boy that went down to Chile, lived about 8 years of his life down there. So as a kid growing up here in Whittier, California, I realized that I, over the years, heard many, many stories about where my dad lived, Potrerillos, Chile, and down in Barquito de Bay, and the earthquakes, and such as that. And so when I was in that class, it's just like a light bulb went off in my head. Chile. And I remember coming home and talking to my wife. I said, honey, I know where God is leading us now. He's leading us to the land of Chile. And she says, yeah, I kind of thought that along, but I just waited for God to speak to you first. So that's kind of how we chose that. It's also interesting how we chose the different cities, but I'll let my wife see if she wants to add something to that.
It's been a joy and amazement to me to see how God does reveal His will in our lives. He does talk to my husband, He does tell my husband, direct my husband, but it's always been that there's been a peace and a agreement between us both before those decisions were final, and that's caused us to have peace in following God's direction.
Well, a lot of times when you hear about someone who being a missionary, you get these ideas in your head, kind of romantic things to do. But basically, being a missionary is doing a lot of things like you would do where you're at. A lot of times, not the fun part of being a missionary. You got to fill out reports, and you've got to be able to do the administrative work and such as that. But basically, as what I would do is you're kind of like an orchestra director, because what you're doing is you are trying to, my favorite verse is 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, which basically says, that which you've heard among many witnesses, that commit to faithful witnesses who are able to teach others also. So we're basically always working ourselves out of a job. So among all the things of having to do the basic administrative work and things like that, we're trying to always connect to people in the mission field. And it's interesting how one of the ways that we see a lot of people come to us, and that is by their needs. In the time of the Bible, Jesus met the needs of the people, and anything from feeding the hungry to also healing the sick. But many times what we see in Chile is like 60% of all Chileans go to psychologists. The main problems there are not feeding and health as much as it's mental health. There's a lot of depression, there's a lot of panic attacks, there's a lot of marriage problems. And so people are looking for answers, and they're not getting it from psychology. And so a lot of my time spent during the week, along with, of course, preparing Bible messages to feed the people in our church the gospel and the Word of God, is doing counseling. We counsel and have kept a number of marriages together that would have broken up. We've helped people have victory over depression or panic attacks or other type of things. We've helped parents learn how to parent their kids and how to deal with people, how to work on forgiveness, how to have hope, how to have faith. And so a lot of what we do is on a personal basis. And it's funny how one person gets victory in their lives. What do? They spread it to somebody else. So we're getting referrals coming in now of people that, I heard that you helped this other couple get their lives on track, and we wondered, could we come into your office and talk to you? And it seems every week we're having somebody come in and looking for some kind of help. And of course, today religion all around the world is in crisis, and many people have no desire to go to church. And yet there are people that are hungry to know, have better life, and we see a lot of people coming in, and then through the counseling, they're opening themselves up for the gospel. So in a moment, I'll probably share a couple of cases, but I wonder if my wife would like to add something to that.
The role that I play on the mission field is a support role. Of course, my first priority is my husband and my children, but my children all went and grew up, and so now I don't have any children left. From the very beginning, though, my husband was very appreciated what I had to offer to the ministry. One of the things he said, I can pay somebody to wash your dishes, but I can't pay somebody to run the Sunday school. And so from the very beginning, I was very active in the ministry of working with the children. But as our churches grow, then I'm into more of an administration position of directing the teachers, of preparing teachers, and administrating. In fact, that's my favorite ministry, is to be with the children, and I like being with them more than administrating. Then also I'm in a support role of the music, and also I work with the ladies' ministry. There again, preparing teachers and directing the administration of the women's ministries.
Now, to give an example of what we're facing there, we had a couple come in, referred to by somebody else, and they were both in second marriages, and it was just about at the end, and they came into my office, both of them just shouting at each other, and so I usually get them to calm down and take them each one at a time. But long story short, they weren't coming to our church, they just wanted to come to my office. And as we worked with them, then they said, would it be okay if we came to your church? And I said, well, yeah, sure. And so they started coming to our church, and now they've both been saved, baptized, they both sing in the choir, they're both in our leadership program. and they have invited others to come that are the same thing is happening. But then there's John. Now John and Karina were a couple that came to our city of Iquique from Santiago, and they didn't know anybody in town, and so she went to the hairdressers to get her hair done. And she's talking, I guess, what ladies do when they're at a hairdresser. They talk about their problems, and the hairdresser, who was from our church, said, well, why don't you go talk to our pastor? So Karina came to our church, and she said, could I talk to you? Because I have a husband, and we're having problems, and such. And so she talked him into coming and talking to me one time in my office. So I said, sure. Well, John came in, and he sat with his arms crossed like this, and he said, I feel like I'm in the principal's office. And I said, yeah, I understand. I said, listen, I'll talk to your wife. You don't have to come back anymore. And I kind of had a couple of jokes and talked about marriage and how it's difficult and such. And when the hour was over, I says, okay, we're done. You don't have to come back. I'll talk to your wife. He said, no, I want to come back. Can I come back next week? So I said, sure, come on back next week. So he came back the next week, and then he came back the week after that. And the third week he came, he says, now I want to let you know I'm an atheist. I says, okay, that's cool, and then the next week he comes back and he says, now you want to know why I'm an atheist? I says, okay. He said, I'm an atheist because I'm so disillusioned with all religions, and especially my own and such. And I says, okay, I am too. I said, I'm pretty disillusioned with religions. And then he started asking questions about God and about the Bible, and then I started answering them. And the next thing, John is asking to be saved. And so John got saved, his wife got saved, she sings in the choir now, and their son got saved, they're all baptized, they're also in our Bible study now, and inviting others. He invited his boss to come to church. And so through these one by one, we're seeing people who feel there's no answers for the problems that they're facing today. They feel like the church is only after their money, they think that the religions are all a bunch of hypocrites, and yet they do have real problems. And so basically, that is one of our main work, is what we're doing, is trying to reach people where they're at, share the gospel with them. And when their lives change, that only God can do, it's interesting how that opens up a whole circle of influence again. Mm-hmm. Now, some of these that we're winning will go on to become pastors and start their own churches as well. But that's the most part. We also do some building. We just got done with a 2-year building program, and learned a whole lot about construction that I didn't know about before that. So probably have a little bit more gray hair than I did before we started as well. So, but that's basically what we do, besides all the normal day-to-day things that usually you guys would do as well. Well, a lot of times when we're working with a local church, we don't realize that basically what we're trying to do is work ourselves out of a job. Because we went down there not just to go ahead and share the gospel with people and see them saved, because what happens to them after that? And then what happens when the missionary comes home? So what we are basically doing is trying to duplicate ourselves in such a way that once the time comes that God pulls us out of there, that they're not depending on the missionary. So our challenge is that God will raise up men and women who will take our place. And so at this point in time, we have started 10 different churches. And these churches that we've started, we have to take somebody, break them of what they were believing before, and reprogram them with the scriptures. And so we've seen some victories. We see our main church there in La Sedena that we had, and we left that with a young man, Luis, who took the church that was running about 300 at the time and is now running about 450. And he has administrative skills. And the first thing, of course, we have to make sure that they are really right on the doctrine, that they know the scriptures, they're not just moved aside. There's so much internet today that even down in Chile, they get connected with the internet. And there's so much stuff on there that sounds so good, but when you look at it, it's an error. And so we had to take our national pastors that we have prepared with our institute and show them how to not only read the Bible for themselves, study the scriptures, but know their doctrine and be firm, not only what they believe, but why they believe it, and how to confront challenges to what they're believing. There's things about eternal security, about the different other doctrines that are going around, that they need to be able to know that. So that's why our institute is so important. But then again, we have some others that come in, and one of the things we try not to do is throw money at a problem, because normally when you throw money at a problem, it gets worse and not better. And so that they don't get dependent on American money, they're getting dependent on the American missionary. They're actually, they're able to understand that their supply comes from God, not the missionary, that their doctrine comes from the Bible, not the missionary, that their support comes from the Holy Spirit, from their own congregations, and that they need to develop that. We like there to be cooperation without being like just a man that just does whatever you tell him to do. And so that's been a challenge to be able to teach that. Their culture is different than our culture. There are a lot of things that are similar, but there's a lot of things that are different. And so we try to help them not to just go with whatever is popular, and that they be able to stand by their convictions. Would you have something you would like to say on that?
I would like to talk about the challenge of getting a Catholic into a Baptist church. A lot of people have asked me that question. And praise the Lord for his direction. Some of the things we just found along the way, but it is true. In Chile, they are Catholic and they are religious. They are, they'll say they're Christian rather than saying that they're Catholic. Well, we're Christian, we don't need a missionary. So we don't even use the word missionary for us in Chile. David is a pastor there is the term that we use, which is less offensive. The Catholic Church says that anything outside of them is a cult or a sect. And so they have an emotional distancing or defense mechanism. Oh, I don't want to go to a sect. I don't want to go to a cult. I don't want to go in your door. And so we have to take that and try and get that barrier down. The other side of the coin is that the Pentecostal movement is very strong in Chile, and it's very emotional and very demonstrative. The television has done a documentary and have showed it in Chile that, oh, they're going to dance in the aisles, and they're going to fall down, and they're going to do all sorts of strange things in a church that's not Catholic. And so they think, well, if I go in there, that's frightening. That, especially for a Catholic, then that's not something that I want to be involved in. And so one of the things that we've found to be very helpful is our Christmas cantata, our Easter cantata, and our anniversary. And that is based with a celebration and having a musical presentation. To get people to come to that, then we give them a formal invitation. Chileans are very gracious people, and for them to receive a formal invitation that is written and printed and elegant, then they have a hard time turning that down. They reluctantly come into the door. And the most common phrase as they go out the door is, I didn't know a church like this existed. And by the time that they've come to their second event, their third event, very often then they have a God appointment, a situation that comes into their life that is beyond what they can handle. And they'll say, I need to talk to somebody. I want to talk to, well, I don't want to talk to the priest. He doesn't know anything about family affairs or marriages. I wonder if I could talk to that pastor at that church that I visited. And they'll come back, and that'll be their introduction into the church. God has used that tremendously to get people into our church, to drop the barrier of that we're not Catholic and it's okay to come in the door.
One of the things is there's no shortcuts in the ministry. Many times people are looking for shortcuts. Usually the best fruit is long term. You're working with them. You're not pressuring. We don't like to pressure people. No. We don't like to I'm thinking in Spanish now, exigir, but to just to really demand these things. Uh-huh. But they still think that just because they have a belief in God that's sufficient. There's something I always use sometimes in sermons, that when I show the difference between what religion is and what a relationship with Jesus Christ is. And I like to use the little peephole that's in a door. And just think I came up to your door and I'm knocking on the door. And there's a woman inside the mother is inside the door, and she looks out the people and says, "Oh no, the pastor's here," And then the door opens up a little bit, and the chain's still on. She says, "Oh, Pastor, it's not a good time. You see, I've got all my kids in bed, and my husband's not home yet, and things are pretty unkept at the moment. And could you come back another time?" And of course, I'll say, "Sure, no problem." Then I'll ask the question, did that woman recognize who I was?
Yeah.
Of course. Did she talk with me? Well,
Yeah.
she did that too. Did I get inside her home? Well, no. I said, well, that's religion. See, religion is people who recognize there's a God and will even talk to him. But a relationship with Jesus Christ is taking the chain off the door, opening up the door, and saying, just as I am, and asking that person to come in. And that's the faith in Jesus Christ. And that's what we have to get past the religions. And that has been very, very helpful in dealing with people that are not only Catholic, but of other religions as well. We do see that our goal is to be able to get past their culture so that they would come in and actually give a chance for hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay, as we go on the mission field, we always have victories as well as defeats. Sometimes there'll be lulls, sometimes there will be great things going on, and we'll stop and evaluate from time to time. Sometimes we get to the point where we are at a lull. Maybe we haven't seen a lot of fruit lately, and we think over the 39 years we've been on the field, and yet we stop and we say, but where would Jose Luis and Lucho be today had we not come? They're both pastoring churches. They're twins. They're pastoring churches today. Where would Geraldine and Eduardo be? Where would their little Martina, their 9-year-old daughter, their parents were separating, and she was in crises, and now she's so happy. They are upset when there's no church services because they just feel like their lives have been so changed. So we start looking at the victories in people's lives that are going on. We'll walk into a supermarket and have 3 or 4 people there that will recognize us, and that's just kind of a neat feeling to say we actually belong now. They know who we are. But it's seeing lives changed. It's seeing churches started. It's seeing somebody whose life was so bad off, and now they're on a track, and not only are they've been saved, but they're also now witnessing and winning other people to Christ as well. We've seen people that were so against us. My wife can tell the story of little Roberto and his mom. I'm going to let her tell that story of Roberto and his mom.
Roberto would come into he was brought to Sunday school, or to the church, by grandma. And he loved to come to church. So the door was open, then he was there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But his mother had told him he wasn't supposed to go to that church. He wasn't supposed to go in there. But he would play outside, and so she wouldn't know where he had gone or what he had done. And in that church, we were in a house, and the auditorium was such that we didn't want the children to go out of the classroom because it would be an interruption to the auditorium and what was going on in the living room, dining room area. But in the middle of the class, it was very common for him to hear, Roberto, Roberto, his mother calling, and he'd say, oh, you got to lift me out the window. And we'd open the window and we'd lift him out, and he'd run home, and he'd run the back way home while she was standing in the front of the house calling for him to come home. And that went on for some time. Well, then his brother got invited to camp, and at the end of the camp service, at the end of the camp week, Mom and Dad came to the service to hear his presentation, the older son's presentation. Well, that night, they got saved. Maria became a Sunday school teacher over the years, and Roberto, of course, went through the youth department, and a fine Christian young man. But as Maria was teaching her Sunday school class, the same thing happened to her. Yerko would come to class, and in the middle of the class, his mother would be on the door knocking. Is Yerko in here? I told him not to come to church here. And she would take Yerko home. Well, she also got saved, and Yerko, actually Yerko was able to invite her to go to camp as a paseo, as an outing. And it was at camp at the end of the week that she received Christ as her Savior. And she also serves in the church today.
And not only that, but that Yerko's two brothers were Jose Luis and Lucho that are both pastoring churches today. One was a good-sized church, about 450 there. Yeah. And so that's the victories that we see, is just seeing lives just completely changed. And then those lives are going on and changing others. And our goal, like I said, we're working ourselves out of a job, is at this moment in time, we're planning to go back. And but if we were not able to go back, those 10 churches would still go on, just as they are right now. So they're not dependent on us or depend on our money. So now I don't know when we get to go back because of what's going on right now, that the coronavirus and such. Not only is that affecting our country, but it's also affecting Chile. And so they've now closed their borders. And so that's one of the challenges that we're facing, I didn't mention earlier, is that when we can get back, and they're going through the same types of problems that we are here, how many people can start to be meeting at one time. And so we're also considering going towards video presentations as we are doing our services. And so I'll ask you to pray for that. Well, we're excited about things that are going on now as the churches are being started, but we have a man in our church now that was saved, and we baptized him. He was a politician. His son actually is the governor for our state, and as well as he owns a radio station. And so he has a secular radio station, does a lot of news and sports and such, and he has asked me, and now I am on the radio every day, 5 minutes a day. It's going through the entire region, not only our city, but also in Alto Hospicio and in the Almonte and such as that, some of these interior little towns that we don't get to, but they get it on their radios. 5 minutes a day, a gospel message is coming through. Another thing that's going on is in our church there in La Serena, the pastors felt a burden towards the large gypsy community there, and so they actually have a ministry to the gypsies. And in fact, the national pastor Luis there actually has adopted 2 gypsy children because their parents were not able to take care of them and such, and so he's actually now the adopted parents of 2 gypsy children. And I shared with him the story about Gypsy Smith, who was a gypsy that was converted and became a great evangelist in the United States. But we have churches started. We also have our Ala de Gracia, which is our ministry down to the southern islands, where they go out once, and now they're doing about 3 times a year. They'll take a group of doctors and nurses to the different islands off of Chiloé, and they'll take that as well as giving free medicine, and then they'll take in the gospel to those people that are on those islands. And as I talked to Abner, who's out of our church, I said, not only do you need to get the gospel to them, but you've got to have a means that you can start either Bible studies or small churches that can reach these people. They need to have more than just the gospel. But they had 100 people go this past January down to the islands in southern Chile. We now, with Dustin, who is near to us, he's actually working in our church while we're here in the States. Dustin and I will be working together now to see new churches started. We have 2 church plants started. To be started when we get back. One is in the northern part of the city of Iquique with a man that we have discipled, him and his wife, Guillermo and Pamela. And then another church that we're trying to start on the interior, which is probably be either Pica or Pozalmonte. So these are 2 church plants that we wish to do. But when we were down in the other area in La Serena, we saw with 9 churches started. The Iquique church was the 10th church. And when God called me up to the north, which is about 15-hour drive farther north, my prayer to God was, if you allowed us to do this impact church in the city of La Serena, let me start an impact church there in the city of Iquique, which is a hub church that will start satellite churches starting from that. So our goal is to see 10 churches started up in the very northern part of the country. So we'd ask your prayers for that, because there's 2 things you need. The need is there. There's neighborhoods, there's cities, there's small towns that need a gospel preaching church. but there's also the need for national pastors. And we're willing, and we have the means to prepare them. We have our Bible Institute, but we're asking God to touch lives, and young men, or even older men, to give of their lives, that they would be able to start these churches. And so my goal is one day to be leaving Chile and have at least 20 different churches functioning in the country of Chile. So I'd ask for your prayers. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, I would like to talk about the challenges that we have with politically and socially that is going on in our government. David likes to use the term that Chile is a wannabe America. And so many of the issues that you're dealing with here, we are also dealing with there. Now, we do not have a Christian day school. We do not have a Christian school in our area that that's not part of their Christian culture there, to send their children to a Christian school. But in the schools, they're pushing transgender, and they're dealing with the rights of the gay community is a big issue. You might have seen, you may not have seen, in October last year, Chile kind of erupted, and we had a lot of unrest, had a lot of protest. Our city was permeated with tear gas. You could just, even during the day, just going down the street, you'd feel your eyes burn because of the amount of tear gas that they had used the night before. And I remember going down a street that I often went down. I got up early that morning and went down that street. It looked like a war zone. We now have no picture windows left in any storefronts. There's no store, you don't go down the street and look in shops. They're all covered with steel sheet metal for protection. And so there's been a lot of unrest. They asked for a new constitution, which would affect, we believe it will be affecting our religious freedom, particularly as it crosses that situation of transgender, that they're going to put a lot of restrictions on even churches in that aspect. The vote is to take place in April. And so they expected March, April, and May were going to be a lot of unrest. Now the coronavirus has hit, and we can have one thing to say, thank you, Lord, for the coronavirus. They have forgotten about protesting, and they're all hysterical about the virus. And so we are thankful for that, but we do need you to be praying for our country and the religious freedom and the social environment in which we're ministering. We have some challenging days ahead. America has some challenging days ahead. We're praying for our churches here in America. Please remember to pray for us.
Hey everyone, wasn't that awesome? God is so good and doing such amazing things, and it's so cool that we get to be, in our way, a part of it. That's what you can say when you give and pray for our missionaries. Hey, we have a missionary that's kind of in-house, a missionary family that's getting ready to go to Sendai, Japan. They're hoping to go in the next couple months. This is Chris and Jackie Bonkoski. They are so close to getting all their support and getting ready to go. Here's a quick update from them. Check it out.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackie and this is my husband Chris. We're the Bonkoski family along with our daughters Araya and Caitlin, getting ready to go to Japan as full-time missionaries.
Yeah, we just wanted to give you a quick update as to where we're at in that process with everything going on. We are currently at 93% of our monthly support, so praise God, He's been providing in great ways. And that means we just need $800 more in monthly support, so we're so close. And we've also started the visa process. Got the paperwork in, so that process will be taking place in the next 6 weeks. And as of right now, we're slated to be able to move to Japan the first week of June. So as long as nothing changes, that's the track that we're on right now.
Yeah, we're just taking it day by day and looking to the Lord as He has never let us down yet as to His timing and what's going to happen. So we have faith and appreciate your prayers during this time as we continue to move forward and take steps to be able to get to Japan, like Chris said at that time at the beginning of June. And especially right now, especially as we're all praying through this challenging time and practicing social distancing, we don't want to be antisocial. We'd love to be able to connect with you and be able to do that virtually. So go ahead and just look at your screen for contact information to reach out to us, and we would love to be able to set up a time to be able to chat with you. We can find out how we can be praying for you, as well as give you some more personal updates as to how you can be praying for us and what's going on our end.
Thank you guys so much. We hope you all have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
All right, take care. God
Bye.
bless.
We love the Bonkoskis. We're excited for them, and I really want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to get on to Team Japan, be part of their giving family, and support them with your prayers as well. We hope they get to go to Japan and do God's work there very, very soon. Now we're going to look at our next missionary family that came out for our conference. This is Ben and Raylene Walker. They are missionaries to Christchurch, New Zealand. Lots of amazing stuff going on over there, and this is them talking about it. Check it out.
So we are the Walkers, and we are missionaries to New Zealand. We've been in New Zealand together for the last, 8-9 years together, serving full time. And we are church planters, and in March of this last year, we planted a church in the heart of the city of Christchurch, New Zealand. Several years ago, we went on a survey trip to Christchurch. It all came about because some friends came to us and said, hey, we have a daughter or a son, or there were some grandparents that came to us all within like a 3 or 4 week period that said, we've got friends and family in Christchurch and they can't find a church. Do you know anybody? And so I started looking around, and I started calling and asking questions and sending emails, and I didn't actually know anybody in Christchurch, and I had lived in New Zealand at this point for 15, 16 years of my life, and I was like, man, why do I not know anybody? And so then we did a survey trip, and we went to Christchurch, and we actually went to 2 cities. The first city we really wanted to go to, it was a really nice city, and we were like, God, please call us here. Yeah. And we spent 4 days there, and then we only saved 2 days for Christchurch because there's so many earthquakes there. We were like, you know what, God, you're going to have to make your will very evident within a short period of time when we go there. And so we went to the first place for 4 days, felt nothing, and then went to Christchurch, and as soon as we landed.
Yeah, as soon as we landed, I was like, I just had this peace. I was like, this is where we're supposed to be. I can just see us raising our family here. And Ben's like, well, I'm not feeling that yet. You're going to have to give me some time. We just got off the airplane. But it was cool, the journey that we then took from that point for the next several days, touring around the city, where God just started to do a whole new work inside of us for this city.
So at the time that we had showed up at Christchurch, there had been an earthquake about 5 years prior, and so we would have thought that as we did the tour of the city, that everything was rebuilt and they had started moving on, but actually 80% of the city had still not been rebuilt, and that was really surprising. So then we got on a bus tour of the city, and they started explaining the story, and we just started seeing all the devastation there. But what really drew our attention was the fact that as we were on the bus, we drove past one church that was closed, another church that was closed. They had, it was real gruesome. They had, padlocks on the outside and, fences everywhere and gates closing, and barbed wire. And I'm like, man, outside of a church, you'd think they would have fixed this by now. And we found out that a little over 70 churches had closed down in Christchurch 5 years prior and had never reopened. And so that was really, really kind of like a moment where we were taken back. And I remember we went to a Catholic church, and we were standing outside the Catholic church, and I'm praying to God for a sign. I'm like, God, give me a sign, right? As I'm standing outside of a closed church. I'm like, God, give me a sign. I was like, this is a big move to move our family from the one island of New Zealand where I grew up to this island. And I was like, I don't know anybody here. And there was a scripture that was etched in the courtyard that said, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. And at that moment, I just thought, man, nobody has been going to this church for a very long time. And I felt like God, I had one of those moments where the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt like God just speak directly to me, not in an audible way, but in my spirit. I felt it very strongly that this city was a city that was broken and in need of spiritual healing, and that God wanted us to go there to start a church. And so then I said to Raylene, well, I guess we're moving to Christchurch. And then we got on a plane, went back to the States, packed up all our stuff, and moved back to Christchurch, where we've been for the last 2 years. I would say mission work in New Zealand is not what you would necessarily picture as missionary work, in the sense that a lot of people picture beaches and cruise ships and fun things like that, which we do have those things, and that's fun. But it's like anything, you know, people that live outside of California are like, man, have you been to Disney? And you're like, I live right down the road, yeah. And it's not as special when you live there. And so I would say New Zealand on the outside is a very, very beautiful country. We have some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. We have some of the most beautiful mountain hikes you could go on in the world. We've got Mordor, we've got, you know, Frodo Baggins and all of those guys down there. But I would say that the major difference is that whenever you travel to another country and you go to a travel agent, they always show you the best photos of a country, even if the weather's not that way when you get there, because they want you to buy the tickets, right? And so I would say when you get to New Zealand, spiritually, it's not the same as the photo. We have one of the highest teen suicide rates in the world. And of the highest teen suicide rates in the world, I think New Zealand is like top 10 in the world countries with that issue. Our city, Christchurch, is the #1 city in our whole nation with teen suicide. So I'd say a prime example of this is shortly after we started our church, there was a young man that came up to me in the entryway back where we were serving coffee, and we were shaking hands, and I noticed he was really down that day, and I was like, hey man, if you need any help, let me know. If you need someone to talk to, let me know. And he's like, yeah. I said, no, I really mean that. If you need to go out for coffee this week, let me know. You look really down. And he sent me a message a couple days later, and he said, hey man, I'd actually planned my suicide that week. And he said, when I showed up, I was like, I can't live life anymore. This is just not worth it. And he said, when you took that time out just to communicate that you cared for me, he said, it made a big difference. And several months later, he told me that this church saved my life. He said, I found a newfound sense of purpose here. He serves on one of our teams. He helps out with the loading and the unloading. And so it's just really, it's just different for us. Like when I thought of missions growing up, I always thought of like, you went on a missions trip to Nicaragua one time. And so I always thought like Central America third world, but New Zealand's not like that. It's a very beautiful country on the outside, but on the inside, it's a very broken nation. And so I would say missions is a little bit different in that regard there.
Yeah. I think what like ministry looks like for me, I work with like our office team, and so we do everything internally, getting everything ready for our Sunday services, so our kid programs, making sure those are ready for teaching. I do the teaching for kids ministry as well, so I do that. And also leading our crews, which are kind of like our life groups. So working on material for that, or coordinating with our crew leaders, seeing what things that they need, following up with people. So ministry for me looks like different things every day. And one day solely just for my office team that I have volunteers that come in and help me work on what all we need to accomplish, grocery shopping for what we need for Sundays for our coffee cart. So I often think for us, because we are in almost like a first world country, it's that we look like a church plant in New Zealand. Yeah. So a lot of times you think mission work and you think third world, but
feeding people.
For us of where we are, it's almost like you have to think church plant for New Zealand. And that's honestly, that's how we view it. That's how we see it, because we've lived in New Zealand for so long that it's not like we're on a mission field. For us, this is home. And so this is a church that we're desiring to plant in a city that, in many senses, you grew up in.
I think for me, on a practical level, I prepare sermons. I have 2 guys that are in training right now for like being pastors. And so I meet with them every week. We go over what it means to actually study the Bible, what it means to prepare a sermon. And then in cases like right now when I'm in the States, they're actually at a place that they can fill in for me, so they preach for me. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about, is raising leaders. We have a lot of life groups and different things that we do. I would say I edit website, I take photos, I edit video, it's when you're starting your first year, you're doing everything, right? And so that's kind of where we're at. We're within our first year, so we're doing everything. We both load up all of the gear for our entire church at our house. It's stored in our garage, and we load it entirely on a truck, just the 2 of us. Yeah. And then once we pull it into the church car park, that's when everybody from our team helps us unload. But then when they bring it back to our house, it's oftentimes just us and a couple other people unloading it in our house. So it's definitely different than what I thought it was going to be like, and it's more rewarding than I thought it was going to be, and it's also in some days more painful than I thought it was going to be like. It's like this caveat. I thought church planting and being a missionary was going to be like, today's a good day, tomorrow's a bad day, this is a good day, that's a bad day. But I think in church planting, and I think in our context, you can have simultaneously the best day ever and one of the hardest days of your life. And it's all happening at the same time. And I think that's one of the hard things about what we're doing, is like, we literally prayed for a girl that a demon would leave her. And she comes back, a few weeks later, and she says, this is the first time in 9 years I've been able to sleep without getting a demonic dream. In 9 years. That's amazing. But then you have somebody else that's like, you're a horrible leader, and you're just like, it's like the best and the worst kind of mixed all together. And so I'd say that's the beauty of what we're doing, and some of the difficulties of it. I'd say probably the biggest challenge we have, I would have told you when we first got started, this is going to be our challenge. It'll be, do we get people in the door? Is this thing going to work? Are we going to get people here? I would say, a year into it, the biggest challenge is a spiritual challenge. Mm-hmm. We're in a spiritual warfare. Yeah. And the enemy comes at us. Paul writes in scriptures in the New Testament from prison oftentimes. And he's writing to churches to encourage them while the dude is sitting in prison. And I'm just so mesmerized by his ability to do that in his relationship with Jesus. And I'd say for us, the challenge is that, you'll wake up one day and you'll feel like everything is going great. And then you'll get a nasty text message, or you'll get a harsh email about how something didn't work. And it's half right. And you're like, man, I don't know what to do with this. And then literally the next day, I'm just going to give you the raw part. Like the next day you have like the highest offering you've ever had at your church. And you're just like, what is going on? I think the challenge is maintaining your spirit and all of the challenges that are going. You'll have a person leave, or you'll have a person upset, or the offerings will be down, or whatever it might be. Those things vacillate all the time. I would say the biggest challenge is like staying focused on the mission and not being discouraged, not being distracted by whatever the enemy throws your way, not chasing the bunny trails of offense, not chasing the bunny trails of discouragement, but just getting up every day and doing the same thing over and over and over. I love what scriptures say when it says, we will reap in due season if we faint not. I think for me, the biggest challenge is like just waking up every day and saying, we're going to do this again today. We're going to do this again today. We're going to do this, and we're going to see a harvest come. And we do. We see things happen, and I think it's just ignoring the bad, embracing the good. What did Paul write? He said, whatsoever things are true and noble and just and peaceful, think on these things. There was a reason why he told us to do that while he was writing from prison, right? He was doing that because he knew the moment we give into discouragement, the moment that we let the enemy's voice creep in is the moment that he starts to win, and then we're dead in the water. It doesn't matter if 500 people show up at our church the next day, we won't have the spirit to minister to them. So I'd say maintaining your spirit. I'd say for us, on a tangible level, two things. I'd say financially, that's one of the biggest struggles. So it takes the average New Zealander 1 year, this is a national statistic, takes 1 year before they give their first dollar of attending every single Sunday. And so I would say financially, as the church begins kind of gaining ground and momentum financially and convincing people to give and be generous for the mission, that's a challenge. Now, the good part to all of that is that we have a very, very young church, and we're beating all the odds as far as young people who are giving generously to our church. So that's really cool, but it's still a challenge. So I would say, yeah, financially there's a challenge there. And then even location, we are in a city center, and getting a venue and finding a place to meet has always been very, very difficult for us, especially like think downtown LA. If you get a venue, is there free parking? Do you have to validate parking? Do you have to pay for parking? In New Zealand, that can be expensive. We're in one of the top 10 most expensive countries in the world. So gas is around $8, $9 a gallon right now. So it's just very, very different. So those are some of the basic challenges. What would you say?
I think for us, we're a young church, and probably we have a high ratio of volunteers, which is so unusual, but probably like 90% of our community serves. So for me, that leads our change makers, leads our volunteer serve teams. I'm constantly going, are you serving too much? Making sure people don't burn out, because there's a lot to do in something so small leading up to everything. And so I think that's kind of a challenge at the moment, is that we have a lot of people who want to volunteer and serve, but it's making sure people have the capacity for a season to be able to commit to something and to stick to it, and be able to give that time as well as the rest of life that you do. So, but we have a great team that does it, and that's I think something that's really unusual and awesome about our community, is that we have such a huge volunteer community.
I think some of our greatest victories at Story, well, actually, we haven't said that at Story. Let me start that over, all right? So our church's name is Story Church, and I would say that some of the biggest victories that we've had at Story over the last year could be reduced down to like just following people's actual story that come to our church. And so I'm thinking of Jeremy and Julie right now, and it was a couple that had grown up with me in church, and when I moved down to Christ Church from Auckland, which is a whole nother island, I moved there, and they said, you know, what are you guys doing? And I said, well, we're going to start a church for people who don't want to go to church. And they said, man, that sounds really great. And then when we started talking about what it meant to be a church for people who don't want to go to church, they were like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. And so we kind of just parted ways for a little while. And then several months later, they came back and they said, no, actually, we've prayed about it. And we think that, that God wants us to move down there. So they moved down. And when they came down, it was really awkward at first, because they were coming out of a movement that was very, very legalistic, and they didn't understand why we were doing things the way we were doing them, and how we were connecting people, and how they were growing in faith. And now he preaches for me, the most regular out of any preacher. And then his wife leads and helps lead in our office team, and they serve every single weekend. In fact, right now in New Zealand, they're the couple that's running our church while we're gone. And so it's just been really interesting to kind of see a whole mindset shift, where if I had seen them, 2 years ago, I'd have been like, I don't know if those people will ever come to a church like ours. And then to see them come to our church and pour their lives into it and invest in it and invest financially and sow seed and preach and teach and like just all those different things. It's just been really, really cool to watch a growth of such a drastic change, and where they were when they started to now. That's been really, really cool. And then I would say the other person that comes to my mind is Rebecca. And Rebecca is a pastor's daughter of a pastor in our city. And we say that we're a church for people that don't want to go to church. So she had been disconnected from church for a little while. And then she heard about our church, she came. And man, it just wasn't, it didn't take very long, but just to kind of watch her ask questions about her spirituality and ask questions about God, ask questions about life after death. And we would sit around the bonfire at night at our house together, the three of us, and she would just be there till 12 a.m., 1 a.m. What does God say about this? What does God think about this? And then just to hear, like, a lot of our young adults have said, I never read my Bible my whole life, and I grew up in a pastor's home, or I grew up in the church. I never read my Bible my whole life, but ever since I've been coming to this church, I want to read my Bible. I want to know more about what God says. I want to know more about Jesus. To hear young adults say to us, we've had like 4 people say to us, I was going to commit suicide before I came to this church. And I feel like we can say that and it's like, oh wow, that's really cool. But like to let that sit in, 4 people were going to end their lives. But when they came to a community that loved them where they were at, that treated them just as normal human beings and said, hey, we love you so much where you're at. We don't want you to stay there. We want you to grow, but we're here for you as a community. And to see them now become leaders, and Rebecca now teaches the kids, and just she helps out with hospitality and setting up the coffee cart every week. And I don't know, so just seeing all of that has been a really cool challenge, or a really cool victory.
Yeah, I would say another girl that came into our lives, her story again, a person who was like, yeah, I'm never going to go to church. It's not for me. And to watch somebody's journey as she had gone through something, a heartbreak, and just to see her come to this turning place of like, well, maybe there is a God. Maybe he can give me hope. And to see her start from, I'm not ever going to go to church, to come to a place of following Jesus. And then from there, we were like, hey, we need someone to sing on stage for us. And she's like the first person that gets on stage for us and leads our community for several months until we were able to find more help. And so it's just been amazing to watch people that you always wonder when you are, for instance, when you're on the road traveling, you always wonder who's going to show up at this church that we're talking about. We were on the road for 3 years and you're talking about this vision and this church, but you haven't even started it yet. And so I think the most rewarding part is that when you actually get to do what you've talked so much about, and then you actually get to see the people that you were hoping to see come into your community and find Jesus, and then be like, man, I can see like my life has been changed because of this church. I can't, like, there's countless people, like we had a couple over a couple weeks ago, and they were just like, man, you have no idea what this church means to me and the change that it's brought to us. And so, and it's just so rewarding when you get to see the life change. And I think that's what, on the days that are challenging, it's those victories that you look at and you're just like, but life changes is happening, and that's why we do what we do, and that's why it's so important that we share this better story of Jesus. We just share this story of who he is and his love for others, and allowing people to belong in our community, even if they don't believe, allowing them to have this space where they can ask questions and go on a spiritual journey of discovering and finding and follow Jesus.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I
so good.
Yeah, I would say just on some tangible, just short little, 90% of our church is under the age of 30. In the last 10 years in our city, there's only been 3 churches start, and our church is the 3rd. So seeing what all we're being able to be a part of is really, really cool. I think of the fact that typically in church, when you talk church planting, when you talk giving, when you talk stewardship and generosity, younger people don't give, right? Our church is actually against the trend on that. So I would say most of our young adults contribute financially in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that's really cool to be a part of, to be like, yeah, that may be true for some people, but like we're experiencing a real miracle in our generation that's saying we want to be generous and we want to trust God with our finances, even though we're 19 or we're 20 or we're 24. Like we're going to trust God that He's going to supply our increase. And I think being able to plant those seeds when they're 20, 24 is a lot easier than when they're 35 and you're like, hey, have you thought about giving to God? And they're like, I haven't structured my budget that way, So like getting them to get these rhythms when they're younger, I just feel like we're raising a whole nother generation of leaders spiritually for our generation. And so I think being able to be a part of that is really cool. We're in a really awesome venue in the heart of the city with free parking and ample room. And yeah, so I would say that's a really cool thing that we get to be a part of. So those are some of the victories.
Can you say hi?
Can you say hi? Yeah, so last time we came through, we had just adopted Ava, our daughter, and we were preparing to move to Christ Church to start. Since then, I guess we landed there, and for the first 6 to 9 months, we just spent time just fact gathering and just learning about the city and spending time with other pastors and asking them what the needs of the city were. When we did, what we found out was that only about 5% of our city attends church on the regular, and we're considered one of the most religious cities in all of New Zealand. So then we started talking to people that didn't go to church, and what we found out is that
Oh my gosh.
we found out there were a lot of barriers to people that didn't go to church. And some of those barriers were like the language. They would say to us, hey, I went to church, and I just didn't understand what the heck they were talking about. What does glory mean? I have no idea what that means. Or what does this mean? What does that mean? And so we said, okay, so we started identifying that. Some of them, they were like, I went to a church and they told me what a horrible person I was. And I figured I already knew that before I came in. I was hoping I could get something a little bit encouraging to help me. And so then we just started talking to people. And once we isolated what we figured out to be the vision for our church, I was talking to a lady one day at a shared office space I had, and she said, hey, what are you doing? I didn't want to say I'm a pastor because that seems to always kill the conversation. And I said, I am going to be starting a church for people that don't want to go to church. And she said, well, that sounds like me because I don't want to go to church. What's it all about? And so I got to talk to her about what it was about. And so it's just been really cool to be, a part of that. And so then tragically, the March 15th shootings happened last year. And that really was a devastation for our entire city, but we had not planned to launch this last year. We planned to launch this year, and I had a couple pastor friends call me and say, hey, you should consider moving forward the date. And so we prayed about it, and I was praying about it on the corner of a street, and a stranger came up to me and said, are you a Christian? And I was like, yeah. And he said, God told me to tell you whatever you're supposed to do, you need to do it now. And I was like, well, okay, God, I guess that means we're starting our church. And literally within the next 4 weeks, we had a pretty big budget, an audacious goal on what we believed we needed to start, to have all the gear so we didn't have to go in debt. And God provided all the finances to purchase all of our gear for our church, for every single thing we need, like microphones, like everything we need to be a portable church. We have everything we need to do that. And so that was really cool. And then, yeah, we started meeting once a month for about 3 or 4 months. And then after that, we started gathering some interest. And then September of this last year, we started meeting every single Sunday. And the average size church in New Zealand is 10 people. That's the average size church. And our church runs around 50 people. And so I think that's really cool to be at within 1 year, and just can't wait to see it continue to grow. But that's kind of what we've been up to, and now we're back in the States trying to escape the clutches of the coronavirus, and trying to get back home before they close the borders. So that's what we've been up to. I'd say the way that we need help moving forward, on just a real practical level, we need a lot of prayer. We need prayer to cover Raylene and I's marriage. We're fine. But I would be lying if I didn't tell you that this has been one of the hardest seasons on our marriage, as far as not really between us, but just like the difficulties of expending so much energy, of entertaining all the time and balancing a family life and all those kinds of things. And, so I'd say prayer over our marriage, prayer over our health, prayer over our finances, over our leadership. So that's a real practical way. I'm going to be real brutally honest. Because of the coronavirus right now, when we go back, all the churches in our city are moving to online services. And we don't know how long this is going to be for. Like, we don't know, is this going to be for 3 months? Is it going to be for 6 months or a year? Some of the professionals out there are saying, oh no, this is going to be for a year. This could be for a while. And I'm hoping that it's not that case. But in New Zealand, all of the pastors that I know in our city, they've started talking about this idea of setting up a studio and broadcasting and having just a small amount of people in the studio. And so I think we're going to go forward with that. If we go forward with that, I was looking online last night, and our church's tithes and offerings can sustain us being able to get in a little bit to a little small place that we could do that. But we need to we basically need to be able to continue to have church services. To do that, I phoned some people last night and I got some figures. We need $64,000. That's what we need. The good news is, right now, the exchange rate for America against New Zealand dollar is the strongest it's been in like 10 or 11 years. So that's going to go a long way. That wouldn't go towards my salary. That's not going towards anything else except us being able to get into a venue that we can broadcast from and purchase any gear that we don't already have purchased. We have all the sound stuff, but we need to get some video gear and some different things like that so that we can do that. We need to be able to get in and do that. So the person that I'm in contact with, they're working with a lot of different churches all around Christchurch, and they said around $64,000 is what we need to do that. So that's a very tangible, real ask, And if I would just say this to the person out there who's been praying, and your superpower is that you can make money. It's like what you're really good at. Like, that's what you can do, and there's no shame in that game. And you've been asking God for an opportunity for an investment. I would just, on behalf of my church and my city and my nation, with a church plant that's growing and going forward, we don't want to step back. I would just challenge you to pray and ask God if this could be a moment like that, where you could invest in something that is going forward, that is doing good stuff, but they need some help financially because we're a young church, we're a baby church, and we need some help to push us forward in that. So that would be the request that we would make.
Hey, the Lighthouse, we just want to thank you guys so much for bringing us and being able to allow us to have time here, time away, just to refresh ourselves. Also, just to be able to speak our heart and our vision and just share with you what you get to be a part of, what imprint that you're putting into our ministry on a monthly basis. And for us to just share stories with you of the difference that you are making. And we just want to thank you guys so much for the time that you've allowed us to bring us in and just allow us to have this time here with you guys. So we pray that God will continue to grow and for you guys to inspire your city and to be the lighthouse. And we honestly believe from the very moment that we first stepped into this church, probably 8 years ago, it's been amazing to watch your journey just as well as you guys have gotten to watch ours. So we are cheering you guys on from New Zealand, knowing that you guys can make a difference in your city.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. When you're a kid, you like putting your hand in the cement, even though you know you're not supposed to. And you like carving your name in the tree, kids do that. And I think the reason that we do that, I was thinking about it the other day, I'm like, why do we do that? I think it's because ultimately, even from a very young age, we have a desire to leave a mark behind, to say we were here, that I was here and I left a mark behind. And I would just encourage you that right now you're leaving a mark behind in New Zealand. Like, God has got your spiritual fingerprints all over every single story that's happening in New Zealand, and you're getting to be a part of that. And I would just encourage you, I know you can't see that all the time. I know you don't get to experience that all the time, but there are actual real lives that are changing on the other side of your newsletters, at your wall that you have at the back of the church. Like, there are real people that are changing. Why are they changing? Are they changing because Ben and Raylene is there? Yeah, but really, why are we there? We're there because churches like you support us in being able to do that. So in essence, the lives are changing because of what you're doing. You're leaving a mark behind on the world in the name of Rebecca,
Mommy.
Imogen, Georgia, Jeremy, Julie. You're getting to be a part of those stories. So I would just encourage you, keep it up. Keep doing your thing.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in and listening in on all these great stories of all these missionaries. Now, we've got a lot of missionaries we support, and if you want to be involved in supporting the ones you've heard from today or any of the other ones and just want more information, please connect with us and our missions team will connect with you. You can do that by emailing us at office@thelighthousechurch.online or directly message us through any one of our social media platforms. We'd love to connect with you and connect you to this great thing that God is doing all around the world. You know, we're praying for these people and praying that God would send more and more people into the field because the world needs the light of the gospel. And we're honored to be a part of the solution to all the problems of the world by presenting Jesus as the one for us to look to. And we hope you're trusting in Jesus and want to be a part of the movement of reaching more people in His name. Can I pray for you? And then we're done for the day. Father, we thank you for reaching out in the ways that you have. The fact is that I believe, and anyone who's watching here believes in you, is because someone came and told us about Jesus. So we thank you, Lord, for reaching out to us through those people. And we also thank you that you want to use us to reach out to others. And God, I pray that we would be effective people in sharing the truth of the gospel with the people around us. And may we individually and together as a congregation, as a church, be effective in praying for and supporting and sending people to reach beyond our relations of influence to others in other countries and in other places. Lord, may we have your power to give and to pray like never before in ways that so many people around the world will come to you and be encouraged by their faith in you, and their lives will be changed forever. We thank you for wanting us to be a part of this. May we be faithful to it. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again. God bless. Have a great night.